6, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Essex here today to walk you through one of my personal pieces of equipment. This is my Kubota SideKick. Even though I do all these YouTube videos, I get no sponsorship from any of the major equipment companies as far as machinery goes. I buy all of my own stuff. This is my personal Kubota SideKick. I'm going to walk you around it today, tell you some of the things that I've learned as I've lived for it a while, show you some of the accessories and customizations that I've done to it. Maybe it might give you a couple ideas. But first of all, why the SideKick? Anytime that we're looking at tractors, attachments, any of that kind of stuff, we're always talking about the applications that we have and how we let those applications dictate the equipment and the attachments and whatever it is that we're buying. In my case, I needed this purely for transportation, so I've got some acreage out here that we need to be able to get around and maintain, and just needed something simply to be able to get from place to place. You could do that with a lot of different things, right? Like a golf cart could fit the bill at the same time. You need something with a little bit more off-road capability that can climb some hills, and also something with a decent amount of speed to get from place to place. At the spot where I'm at here, I can go a couple of miles to an uncle's house and a friend's house and grandparents' houses, and those things have some transit time involved, so a little bit of speed was important to me. That's what drove me specifically to the SideKick. I think really highly of the rest of Kubota's utility vehicle line. We sell a lot of them, but my personal needs are a little bit more on the performance, sporty, fun side than they are on the pure work element that is kind of a trait of most of the other Kubota utility vehicles. So that's what drove me to picking up a SideKick. I personally got the orange worksite model, so I have a heavier set of tires and a grill guard on this machine. I picked this particular one, honestly, because it was an aged unit coming out of our inventory, and so I bought it a little bit cheaper because of that. It's an older model year. I probably would have spent the extra $400 or so, though, to go to a special edition unit. For that black look is part of it. I think it's really sporty. It has some additional lighting and stuff on the front. The factory lighting on these things leaves a little bit to be desired. I find myself annoyed a little bit by the cheap rims and wheels that are on here. When you look at a lot of utility vehicles kind of that are in this class, they have a much cooler look, nicer look to them when they have those better rims on them. So, am I vain like that? I guess so, a little bit. I'm proud of this thing and some of the things that I've done to it, and I wish that I would have maybe spent a little bit more money in order to get that version, but I'm not opposed to maybe swapping those out with an aftermarket set in the future. Accessorizing this stuff is a lot of fun. Now, out of the gate when I first got this, I didn't pick up any of the accessories for it, but over the next couple of months, I saw the need for several of them. The very first thing that I put on is this rear bumper back here on the back. Now, one of my kids took this machine and backed it up into a trailer, and when he did that, the deck of the trailer swept underneath the bed and knocked the taillights and stuff out. And I was looking at this thinking that, you know, I let my kids run this kind of stuff, and the odds that they're going to back into things in the future, let's call them, say, very good, right? So Kubota offers this rear bumper kit that I opted to put on. You can very much tell that a lot of these accessories are supplied by a third-party company. Their directions do not look like Kubota directions. They're not very good. One thing that, I don't want to say concerned me, but I picked up on when I was going through and looking, when you go through the accessory catalogs, there are tail lamp guards as an accessory, and there's this rear bumper kit. It's not explained to you well that the bumper kit actually attaches onto the tail lamp guards. So if you went through and configured, say, the build and price tool on the Kubota website, and you checked off tail lamp guards and bumper kit, you would be buying the same parts twice. The other thing I noticed when going through and putting things on and following the directions told me to remove the rear tail lamp assembly and the rear fender all together when installing this piece and not to put them back on again. That didn't make any sense to me when I was going on and putting them on, because I could see that they were going to fit, and I recognize these parts as being the tail lamp guards. So even though the directions tell you to remove those pieces to put this rear bumper kit on, that's wholly not necessary. So thinking along those same lines of what are my kids going to break, the next thing that I added to the front was this mesh guard here on the front. Now, on the back side of the machine back here is where the radiator sits, and I was looking at this and thinking, well, when the kids inevitably run over sticks and limbs and that kind of stuff back in the woods, this can be here in order to protect the front end of the machine and make sure that nothing punches back into that radiator. So mesh guard here in the front, this is a great idea and something I wish we'd see more of even over on the tractors. A lot of the grill guards and that kind of stuff that are put on those machines aren't dense enough to actually protect against a lot of those sticks coming through the front, but for me this should do the job. You'll notice this large light bar up here on top of the roof. This is not an OEM accessory. Kubota does offer one that fills this smaller gap here in the middle. I opted for this one not because I didn't want to buy the Kubota kit, but because I already had this. You notice we do a big Christmas light show in the wintertime. This is actually a light bar that we would had sitting on the side on the shelf already to use for the Christmas light show. So I thought it was really easy just to throw it up on top of my RTV's roof. Wired this back to a switch that's down here in the dash. Now I went through the part system and went through and found the factory switches to go into the knockouts on the dash to make this a really clean installation. It's also really easy to find power on this machine. If you go around with a multimeter and you start looking at the wiring harnesses, there's a number of places on this machine to plug in these accessories, so it's really easy to use all the factory tie-in points and work things up like this light kit yourself. So this back here is the absolute favorite thing that I've put on here so far. This is not an accessory that's available from Kubota or any of the aftermarket companies that we typically go for. This is a Hyphonics Thor Bluetooth speaker that mounts on utility vehicles and off-road equipment. Really cool piece. It clamps onto the roll bar up here with some metal brackets that make this thing super solid on the back of here. So it weighs about 40 pounds or so, and you can be comfortable having all that weight hanging behind your head because of how firmly this attaches on here. I have it tied down to the battery, and I put in a different switch so I can totally kill the power from this so that the little standby current draw off it doesn't eventually kill the battery. There's a bunch of buttons across the front here. It's just very simply a Bluetooth speaker that you have power and volume and track change. I don't listen to music so much while I'm out driving around. That's not so much the point. It's more when I'm out here working. If I'm gonna come out and say, work in the woods, clear area, cut firewood, whatever, being able to park this machine nearby, turn this on and crank it up to be able to listen to music outside, I really enjoy. Finally here in the last accessory is very simply the plastic roof. Maybe a little bit boring, but there have been some interesting improvements that have been made to these roofs over the years. If you look at a lot of the other RTVs, a bunch of other utility vehicles, a lot of times these things are installed with U-bolts. That leave bigger holes and stuff up here in the roof for water to run through or that kind of thing. They're a little harder to get on and off and install. These things now come through with quick clamps on, so I very easily installed this roof in about 3 minutes. You just lay it up on top of the ROPS, throw the clamps around, lock the latches on, and off you go with the roof. I can see myself getting a windshield at some point, but right now, for the most part, I want to feel the air, right? It's those nicer times of year that I'm out enjoying this thing, and I haven't felt the need to add the windshield and kind of complete the enclosure yet. So now as the owner of one of these things for a while, there's a couple of things that I have learned. I would have done my kind of initial reviews on this machine about 2 years ago when they came out for the very first time. And I had two kind of principal complaints about it at that point. Really liked most of it, but you know, I try to bring a balance to these videos and talk about the good and the bad things even for the products that I sell because it makes them real, right? You want to understand that kind of stuff and not just have me here as a corporate shill. The two principal issues that I would have complained about with the SideKick out of the gate would be that its throttle is extremely jumpy. When you step on the gas, the machine wants to get up and go, and that the governor on the engine when you're right up against the top end of your speed really jumps back and forth. It's a mechanical governor, and it will slow the machine down in order to maintain its max top rated speed, and the way that it bounces back and forth is a little irritating. As an owner of one now and spending more time on one, my perspective of those things has changed a little bit. Kubota did come out with an improvement kit for the accelerator that will change some of the geometry and the springs and stuff and the linkage of that throttle. Now, it is still a little jumpy, but it's not nearly as jumpy as the initial machines were out of the gate. So props to Kubota for having some commitment to a product and coming out with improvements and stuff to address some of those complaints that would have come back from owners. As far as the mechanical rev limiter on the engine goes, you know, it seemed like a bigger deal to me at the time when I was at the store tearing straight up and down the road all the time and just seeing what the machine can do. But actually living with one, the times that you're sitting there pegged up against that upper rev limiter is actually few and far between, and I don't find myself hitting that very often. I just, you know, even when you're cruising from farm to farm back in here, running on trails and that kind of stuff, you know, 40 plus miles an hour is pretty quick. And I just tend not to peg the thing up there against the top and be bothered by that all that often. So that's not been so much of an issue for me either. Personally, I do find myself more impressed by this thing the more that I live with it. I would really have a hard time going through and seeing where, you know, another machine that I'd have experience with before would excel in some fashion. I've not done a lot of pulling with it, you know, yanking stuff out or pulling trailers, where the older RTVs with their hydrostatic transmissions tend to really excel. As a get around utility work type vehicle, I love how this thing feels. I do really like the chassis and the frame that's on here. That kind of foundation that Kubota has from the original RTVs, those big, heavy 2,500 pound utility vehicles, carried up into this model as well. It sits on essentially the same unibody chassis that the rest of the RTV series does. And it is a great foundation. There's nothing about this thing that feels like chintzy or light duty or tin or plastic or any of that kind of stuff, right? And having the opportunity to be on and off a lot of like gators and mules and that kind of stuff, this feels many times more durable than what those do. It has a really solid foundation that all of these things kind of sit on top of, and Kubota is built upon. So like that a lot. I don't have the cylinder to dump the bed. That would be something I might consider adding at some point. I'm all manual dump at this point, and that's been fine for the firewood and stuff that I've been out here and moved around. It hinges in the middle and it tips easily enough that it hasn't bothered me, but that's an accessory that's nice on some of the other machines, so I could consider that one yet too. So kind of in summary, as the owner of a Kubota SideKick, extremely happy with it. And the machine grows on me the longer that I own it. So been very happy with that. Kubota's gonna start shipping, so right now it's August of 2020. The 2021 model year is gonna start shipping here in a couple of weeks. We tell you on tractors and stuff, we don't have model years, but on these utility vehicles and stuff, we do. Being that that's how a lot of the power sport industry operates, these things do have model years. 2021s will be hitting my dealership here very shortly. So if you're interested in a machine like this and we can help you out, give us a call. Also available for any parts and service needs that you might have. You can give us a call at 800-222-3373 or online at messiks.com.